Hi guys, welcome back. This is Eric Lowe from Swordwind Historical Swordsmanship. Once again, I'm joined by Ryan Neal from Swordwind Historical Swordsmanship and the Vulgar Skill. In today's video, we're going to just talk a little bit about the context for Marozzo's Dueling Dagger, because this is kind of a weird, this is sort of a weird thing to find in a HEMA treatise. It's quite common in late medieval and early Renaissance systems to find knife fighting material that talks about being attacked when you don't have your knife drawn with a comparatively short-bladed knife, at least by medieval or Renaissance standards, whereas a typical Bolognese dagger, at least as Marozzo demonstrates it, is significantly longer than my forearm, as you can see here, almost to the point that this is really almost a short-bladed sword with an unusually narrow blade. The other thing that's funny about Marozzo's system is that he assumes from the get-go that both belligerents have their knives ready to go. And as anybody who's done modern knife defense can tell you, that is a crazy way to fight. Knife fights basically almost always in the real world devolve into sort of orgies of cuts and stabs, and nobody really walks away successful from one. And so the question arises, what on earth is Marozzo doing, giving people a system for challenging someone to a knife fight? And the answer seems to be in what he says in the beginning of his section, which is that this is a good weapon to know if you get to pick the weapons. So remember, we're in the 16th century, the personal duel is being invented at this time, and we have this new idea that the challenged person gets to actually decide what weapon they are fighting with. And between the challenge and the acceptance, there will be some period of negotiations between either me and my opponent or our seconds, where people try to get us to resolve our dispute, get somebody to apologize or retract their challenge, and we're basically going through this complicated social dance of trying to save face, but if possible, avoid fighting. Well, if I can challenge my opponent to a fight with knives and no armor, that's a really dangerous duel to have to fight, and it might incentivize my opponent to find a way to negotiate his way out of this duel. And if I can get my opponent to back down, and I didn't have to fight, then I have effectively won that duel in the social context of the day. Of course, if he doesn't back down and my gambit has failed, I do have to be ready to actually fight him with nothing but a knife and, in my shirt sleeves. So Marozzo he's not bluffing exactly, but he is giving you the option as a kind of fully rounded Bolognese fencer to take this very aggressive negotiating stance, essentially, with your dueling partner. It's interesting to note that once the fight starts, he sort of defaults into this Bolognese conservative stance, where you'll notice there are very few attacks that I, as the knife fighter, am supposed to offer. I can attack Ryan's hand, as we saw in his very first chapter, and that's about all he offers, actually. Everything else involves the defender winning. There are a couple of reasons for that, I think. One is that although this is a very large knife, it is still ultimately a very short weapon. And if I try to attack a deeper target, I just end up exposing myself to his weapon. So the hand is about all I can do. Marozzo, as we've seen, is perfectly happy to attack deeper targets, but only once the opponent has screwed up and we've somehow secured their weapon. You guys saw lots of instances in our previous videos where Ryan would do something to my knife hand and then, stab me to death through the chest, or pull me off balance and stab me to death through the chest, or things of that nature. But while we are both in the fight, we're being very conservative and remembering always that a knife fight has a tendency to devolve into just kind of orgies of mutual violence, so we land a hit and we immediately back away. going on here. Something else that's really interesting to note in his introduction is that Marozzo says he's going to tell you how to come to prese with in a knife duel. Prese being the Bolognese word for grappling situations or just ultra close range techniques. And you guys saw a number of those showing up as well, where Ryan would unbalance me or pull me off, pull me into him, or twist my knife arm around so that that was at least temporarily disabled. And if I'm resisting, he could do even worse things to my joints. And that also is effectively part of the Bolognese dueling tactics system. They're not afraid to use fencers' physical attributes to their advantage. Manciolino, for instance, gives the example of if you are a taller fencer, then you should absolutely specify that you're doing a duel in armor, but you're only wearing armor from the waist down. And that was the sort of tactic that they found acceptable. Well, if you are a stronger person, or way more than your opponent, or are better at grappling than your opponent, and Ryan is all three of those compared to me, then you have certain inherent advantages in a knife fight, because you're going to end up coming to prese all the time. And those favor the bigger, stronger, better grappler. And so if Ryan has challenged, if I've challenged Ryan and he is the one who picks unaccompanied knives, now I have to contend not only with the fact that this is a crazy weapon to fight with to begin with, and he probably wouldn't have done that if he didn't kind of know what he was doing, but I'm going to end up getting into close range with him, which is not necessarily, if he had challenged me to a duel with spears, then perhaps I could kind of come up with a game plan for the fight that involves staying at range and think that as long as I can execute that, I'll be okay. With knives, I know I'm going to come within range of his hands. He's going to be grabbing at me, and I might be justly worried about that. So, in context, all of this exists kind of in a world where saving face and social violence is a thing, where people are renegotiating the ideas of what a duel even means. But it also has some really interesting applications to shorter bladed knives, such as you see in modern knife fighting systems, and Ryan's going to talk about that.
So frequently in medieval and Renaissance knife fighting, people talk about the longer knife and how this makes it very different, that like perhaps systems like modern arnis, Gari modern arnis, various Filipino arts, silat, and various other systems seem to be more useful for modern knife fighting. As somebody who's done Dog Brothers style fights where you're allowed to use Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and like hit people with the aluminum training knife or the stick full contact, we just got gloves and fencing masks. I've personally used Bolognese knife to great effect, but you do have to modify it somewhat for the shorter bladed weapon. Obviously, we don't have knives this big, unless we certainly don't walk around with these without running afoul of legal authorities or being considered a mall ninja, probably both. This is not somebody's everyday carry knife. Even hunting knives are not 18 inches with a cross guard. So we have to modify somewhat for our everyday carry. So if we have something like an ordinary pocket knife here, about 5 inches or lower, North Carolina, it's usually about 3.5 inches fully enclosed by the handle, is an ordinary pocket knife, but something similar. We can't really make parries anymore with this kind of weapon. So if Eric gives me a Mandrito Squalimbrado to the head, my parry is going to be not really to the blade. That's going to be too chancy, especially at like high impact and in a live sparring situation. My parry now moves instead to his hand. And I just make the cut here. I parry to his wrist as part of my defense, pass it, very similar to what we did in the Marozzo play. Get that elbow and shank it, or cut his face open. Or if he gives like the thrust from below, a very common attack, I slip the body, slit the forearm, and check and keep going. And these are Bolognese principles, using the footwork of walking the segno, and we just simply modify our defenses so that we are attacking hands, because if we try to like parry, like it's too risky with so short a weapon with so little hand protection. We're usually just going to get stabbed in the hand, we're going to get stabbed in the arm, so instead we rely more on this offhand in our movement to take advantage of being able to come in close with a shorter knife. And that's primarily how you would modify it, even for full contact. And I've done this successfully with the aluminum trainers, like trying to knock each other out with full contact fighting, with shock knives, which you can set up to very high pain settings. And I found it very effective using bolognese for these purposes. So don't give up on applications for your art and think too much in terms of, oh, I've got to have an 18-inch dagger. I'm always of the opinion that you should be able to take a coffee cup and be able to beat the crap out of somebody with it using your system and explain the tactical principles behind it. That's what makes this a martial art, as opposed to purely this hidebound dead thing.
So I hope that was really interesting for you guys. We'll be coming back at a later date with some more knife material from Bolognese and from KDF. In the meantime, thank you very much.